In the opulent halls of Chateau Lavigne, a toast turns deadly when vintner Etienne Dubois collapses, poisoned, his priceless chalice shattered on the floor. Hercule Poirot, the master detective, steps into a web of ambition, betrayal, and secrets. A ruthless rival, a scorned heiress, a meticulous sommelier, each hides a motive, each a suspect. As the clues unravel, the broken chalice holds the key to a chilling murder. Can Poirot's gray cells uncover the truth before the killer strikes again? Chapter 1. The Invitation to Chateau Lavigne. The late afternoon light filtered through the heavy curtains of Hercule Poirot's London flat, casting a golden glow on the polished mahogany table. Poirot, seated with meticulous posture, adjusted the angle of a silver letter opener with the precision of a watchmaker. His small, neat hands, ever fastidious, paused as he reached for the cream envelope that had arrived with the morning post. The paper bore the crest of Chateau Lavigne, a name synonymous with the finest Bordeaux wines. Poirot's dark eyes, sharp as a falcon's, scanned the elegant script of Monsieur Etienne Dubois, the vineyard's celebrated proprietor. Monsieur Poirot, the letter began, your reputation for discretion and insight precedes you. I humbly request your presence at Chateau Lavigne for the unveiling of our Cuvée Éclat, a vintage of unparalleled promise. A matter of delicate concern requires your unique talents. Your attendance would honor us. The signature was bold, yet the words hinted at an undercurrent of unease. Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his curiosity piqued. A vintner of Dubois' stature did not summon a detective lightly. Mon ami Hastings, Poirot called, his voice carrying a melodic precision. What do you know of Chateau Lavigne? Captain Arthur Hastings, sprawled comfortably in an armchair with a newspaper, looked up, startled. Chateau Lavigne. Splendid wines, old boy. Dubois is a legend. His reds are the talk of every club in London. Why do you ask? Poirot held up the letter, his fingers delicate as if handling porcelain. An invitation, Hastings. To Bordeaux. A tasting, yes, but also a mystery. His eyes gleamed with the anticipation of a puzzle. We shall go, I think. The train leaves tomorrow. The journey to Bordeaux was a study in contrasts. Poirot, immaculate in his tailored suit and polished shoes, sat erect, his mind already turning over the possibilities. Hastings, ever the Englishman abroad, gazed out the window at the rolling French countryside, where rows of vines stretched like disciplined soldiers under the autumn sun. What sort of trouble could a vintner have? Hastings mused aloud. A bad harvest, perhaps? Poirot's lips curved faintly. Non, Hastings. A bad harvest does not require Hercule Poirot. This is a matter of human nature, deception perhaps, or danger. We shall see upon arriving at the Bordeaux station. They were met by a driver in the chateau's livery, a taciturn man whose weathered face suggested years among the vines. The road to Chateau Lavigne wound through hills ablaze with the russet and gold of late October. The chateau itself emerged like a vision from a bygone era. Its stone towers rose against the sky, their edges softened by ivy, and its windows glinted with the promise of opulence. As the car crunched along the gravel drive, Poirot noted the meticulous order of the estate, the trimmed hedges, the pristine paths. A place of discipline, he murmured, yet even here chaos may lurk. At the chateau's entrance, Madame Claire Dubois awaited them. A woman of striking beauty, her auburn hair was swept into an elegant chignon, but her gray eyes held a flicker of strain. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice warm yet tinged with restraint. We are honored. My husband awaits you in the tasting room. She led them through a grand hall adorned with tapestries depicting harvests of centuries past, the air faintly scented with oak and lavender. As they approached the tasting room, the hum of voices grew louder. A select gathering, Poirot surmised, befitting the unveiling of a prized vintage. Madame Dubois paused at the door, her hand lingering on the handle. Etienne is preoccupied, she said softly. This event means everything to him. Poirot nodded, his gaze lingering on her fleeting expression of worry. Already the threads of the mystery were weaving together in his mind. Stepping into the tasting room, Poirot absorbed the scene with a single sweeping glance. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over a long oak table where a handful of guests mingled. At the center stood Etienne Dubois, a robust man with a florid face and a booming laugh, raising a chalice in a toast. His presence dominated the room, yet Poirot sensed a tension beneath his joviality. The detective's eyes darted to the others, a sharp-featured man with a calculating smile, a woman in Parisian silks whose poise masked restlessness, and a lean figure in black pouring wine with the precision of a surgeon. The chalices, each uniquely etched, gleamed in the candlelight. Poirot's mind was already at work, cataloging faces, gestures, and the faint discord in the air. Whatever delicate concern had summoned him, it was here, hidden among the clinking glasses and polite smiles. He straightened his tie once more, his gray cells humming. The game, as he often called it, had begun. Chapter 2. The Tasting Room. The tasting room of Chateau Lavigne was a sanctuary of elegance, its high ceilings adorned with frescoes of bacchanalian revelry, their faded hues softened by the glow of crystal chandeliers. Long windows framed the twilight vineyards beyond, where the last rays of the October sun gilded the leaves. The air carried the rich bouquet of oak, leather, and the faint tang of fermenting grapes mingling with the anticipation of the select gathering. Hercule Poirot stood just inside the threshold, his small, precise figure a study in composure, his dark eyes scanning the room with the acuity of a jeweler examining a flawed gem. Beside him, Captain Arthur Hastings shifted, his honest face alight with curiosity, though his thoughts were more on the promise of fine wine than the undercurrents Poirot sensed. The long oak table at the room's center gleamed under the candlelight, its surface polished to a mirror-like sheen. Upon it rested a row of crystal chalices, each etched with intricate patterns, vines, grapes, and heraldic motifs, unique to their owner, a tradition of the Dubois family. At the head of the table stood Monsieur Etienne Dubois, his robust frame clad in a tailored suit that strained slightly at the shoulders. His florid face, framed by a shock of silver hair, radiated a forced joviality as he addressed the small assembly. "Mes amis," he boomed, his voice filling the room, "tonight we unveil Cuvée Éclat, a vintage to rival the gods' nectar." His laugh was hearty, but Poirot noted a flicker of strain in his eyes, a shadow that belied his exuberance. The guests, a curated handful, responded with polite murmurs and raised glasses. Poirot's gaze darted among them, cataloging each with methodical precision. To Dubois' right stood Monsieur Laurent Garnier, a rival vintner from a neighboring estate. His lean frame and sharp features gave him the air of a fox, his smile tight and calculating as he swirled the ruby liquid in his chalice. His eyes, Poirot observed, lingered not on the wine but on Dubois, with a glint that suggested more than professional rivalry. Across from him was Mademoiselle Sophie Leroux, a Parisian heiress whose silk gown shimmered like the wine itself. Her delicate fingers toyed with the stem of her chalice, her lips curved in a smile that did not reach her restless eyes. She was, Poirot surmised, a woman accustomed to commanding attention, yet tonight she seemed distracted, her glances darting toward the door. At the table's edge, Monsieur Philippe Moreau, the chateau's sommelier, moved with the grace of a dancer. His black attire was impeccable, his movements precise as he poured cuvée éclat from a decanter into each chalice. His hands, Poirot noted, were steady, his face a mask of professional deference. Yet there was a tension in his posture, a subtle rigidity that suggested more than the weight of his duties. Madame Claire Dubois, the vintner's wife, stood apart, her auburn hair catching the candlelight. She watched her husband with an expression of quiet concern, her hands clasped tightly before her. The remaining guests, minor wine merchants and a local critic, faded into the background, their presence incidental to the drama Poirot sensed brewing. "Poirot," Hastings whispered, leaning close. "What a splendid setup. Dubois must be proud as punch. But why the summons? Surely this lot can't be up to mischief?" His tone was cheerful, but Poirot's raised eyebrow silenced him. "Mon ami," Poirot murmured, "where there is wealth, ambition, and fine wine, there is always mischief. Observe, Hastings, these are not merely guests. They are players in a game we have yet to understand." Dubois raised his chalice, its engravings glinting, a family heirloom distinct from the others. "To cuvée éclat," he declared, "and to the future of Château Lavigne." The guests echoed the toast, their voices a chorus of feigned enthusiasm. Dubois brought the chalice to his lips, his eyes scanning the room. He took a sip, then another. For a moment all was still. Then his face contorted, a grimace of agony twisting his features. His hand clutched his throat, the chalice slipping from his grasp. It struck the oak floor with a crystalline crash, shattering into jagged fragments that scattered like stars across the polished wood. Dubois staggered, foam bubbling at his lips, and collapsed, his body crumpling beside the broken chalice. A collective gasp tore through the room. Madame Dubois cried out, rushing to her husband's side, her hands trembling as she knelt beside him. "Etienne. Mon Dieu, Etienne." Her voice was a raw plea, but Dubois did not stir. Mademoiselle Leroux froze, her chalice halfway to her lips, her face pale. Garnier stepped back, his eyes wide, though Poirot noted a flicker of something else. Calculation, perhaps. Moreau, the sommelier, stood rooted, his decanter still in hand, his expression unreadable. The minor guests erupted into panicked murmurs, some retreating toward the walls as if to distance themselves from the horror. Poirot moved forward with the calm of a man accustomed to chaos, his small frame commanding the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice steady, "remain where you are. Do not touch anything." He knelt beside Dubois, his gloved hand carefully avoiding the shards of the chalice. The vintner's eyes were glassy, his breath gone, the acrid scent of cyanide faint but unmistakable. Poirot's gaze shifted to the broken chalice, its fragments glinting in the candlelight. The engravings, even in ruin, were distinct, a vine motif intertwined with the Dubois crest. Curious, he murmured, his mind already racing. Why this chalice and why broken? Was it accident or design? Hastings, pale but resolute, joined him. Good Lord, Poirot, is it poison? His voice trembled, but Poirot's nod was curt. Oui, Hastings. Cyanide, I suspect. Swift and merciless. He rose, his eyes sweeping the room. The guests were a tableau of shock and suspicion, each face a potential mask. Madame Dubois sobbed quietly, cradling her husband's head while Garnier's fingers tightened around his own chalice, untouched. Leroux's hand trembled, her wine spilling slightly, staining the tablecloth like blood. Moreau set down the decanter with exaggerated care, his eyes meeting Poirot's for a fleeting moment before darting away. The door burst open, admitting Dr. Jean Lefebvre, a local physician summoned by a quick-thinking servant. He knelt beside Dubois, his examination brief but thorough. Dead, he pronounced, his voice grim. Poison, almost certainly. The symptoms, convulsions, the foam, are consistent with cyanide. He looked up, his gaze settling on Poirot. You are the detective, oui? This is no accident, non? Poirot agreed, his tone soft but resolute. It is murder. The word hung in the air, heavy as the scent of wine. The guests stirred, their murmurs rising, but Poirot's raised hand silenced them. We await the police, but until they arrive, I, Hercule Poirot, will ensure order. No one leaves this room. As if on cue, the heavy tread of boots announced the arrival of Inspecteur André Giraud, a broad-shouldered man with a bristling mustache and a scowl that deepened upon seeing Poirot. Monsieur Poirot, he said, his tone dripping with disdain, meddling again, I see. This is my jurisdiction. His accent was thick, his manner that of a man who preferred action to thought. Poirot inclined his head, unruffled. Inspecteur, I am here at Monsieur Dubois' invitation. A crime has occurred, and I offer my assistance. The method, the motive, these require precision, non? Giraud snorted, turning to his men. Secure the room. No one touches the body or the chalice. He glanced at the shattered fragments, his brow furrowing. Why break it? To hide something? His question echoed Poirot's own thoughts, but the detective said nothing, his mind already tracing the threads of the puzzle. Poirot approached the table, his eyes fixed on the chalice's remains. He crouched, careful not to disturb the shards, and examined them with a magnifying glass produced from his pocket. The engravings were exquisite, the work of a master craftsman, but the break was jagged, deliberate. Hastings, he said quietly, observe the edges. Not a clean fracture. This was no accident of a fall. Hastings peered over his shoulder, frowning. You mean someone smashed it on purpose? Précisément, Poirot replied, rising. But why? To destroy evidence? To divert suspicion? The chalice was Monsieur Dubois' alone. No other was touched. He turned to Moreau, who stood rigidly by the table. Monsieur, you poured the wine. Tell me, was this chalice handled differently? Moreau's face remained impassive, though his fingers twitched slightly. Non, monsieur. Each chalice was filled from the same decanter. I am meticulous in my duties. His voice was smooth, almost too smooth, and Poirot's eyes narrowed. And yet, Poirot said, only Monsieur Dubois is dead. He turned to the guests, his gaze piercing. Who among you saw the chalice before the toast? Who touched it? Silence greeted him, broken only by Madame Dubois' soft sobs. Garnier shook his head, his expression guarded. Leroux clutched her chalice tightly as if it might betray her. The minor guests stammered denials, their faces flushed with fear. Giraud, impatient, barked orders to his men to collect statements. "We'll search the room, the chateau, everything," he declared. "The poison came from somewhere." He cast a sidelong glance at Poirot as if daring him to interfere. Poirot merely smiled, his mustache curving faintly. "Inspecteur, you will find the truth in the details. The chalice, the wine, the hands that poured it, these are the keys." As Giraud's men began their work, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami, this is no simple crime. The chalice was chosen, the poison precise. We must learn who had access, who had motive. Observe the suspects, their eyes, their hands. They will betray themselves." Hastings nodded, though his expression was dubious. "But Poirot, it all happened so fast. How could anyone plan such a thing in a room full of people?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "That, Hastings, is the genius of the crime. It is bold yet hidden. The murderer is here among us, and I, Hercule Poirot, will find them." He turned back to the room, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The broken chalice, the poisoned wine, the fleeting glances of the guilty, these were the pieces of the puzzle, and Poirot was determined to fit them together. The tasting room, once a stage for celebration, was now a theater of suspicion. As the police cordoned off the area and the guests were ushered to a nearby parlor to await questioning, Poirot lingered, his gaze returning to the shattered chalice. Its fragments, scattered like a broken promise, held the secret to Etienne Dubois' death. And Hercule Poirot, with his gray cells and unyielding method, would uncover it. Chapter 3. The Broken Chalice. The tasting room, so recently alive with the clink of crystal and the murmur of anticipation, now lay under a pall of silence, broken only by the low voices of Inspecteur Giraud's men as they cordoned off the scene. The shattered remnants of Etienne Dubois' chalice glinted on the oak floor, a jagged constellation against the polished wood. Hercule Poirot stood near the table, his small frame a study in stillness, his dark eyes fixed on the fragments as if they might whisper their secrets. Captain Hastings, hovering at his side, shifted uneasily, his face pale in the flickering candlelight. The scent of cyanide lingered, faint but acrid, a grim reminder of the vintner's fate. "Poirot?" Hastings ventured, his voice low. "It's ghastly, isn't it? To think someone in this room, someone we saw toasting and smiling, did this." He glanced at the guests, now sequestered in the adjoining parlor under Giraud's watchful eye. "But how?" The chalice was in Dubois' hand. Surely no one could have slipped poison in without being seen. Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his mind at work. "Mon ami, the impossible is merely the improbable in disguise. The poison was administered here in this room, and the chalice. Its destruction is no accident. Observe, he knelt with the grace of a cat, producing a pair of white gloves from his pocket. With delicate precision, he lifted a shard of the chalice, its vine and crest engraving catching the light. This was no casual drop. The break is too forceful, too deliberate. Someone wished to ensure it could not be examined whole." Hastings frowned, crouching beside him. "You mean they broke it to hide the poison? But why not just take it away?" "Précisément, Hastings. To remove it would draw attention. To shatter it, c'est une distraction. The fragments scatter suspicion like dust in the wind." Poirot's eyes gleamed as he placed the shard back, careful not to disturb the scene further. He rose, brushing his gloves with a fastidious flick. We must learn who had the opportunity and why this chalice, this heirloom, was chosen. The room was now under the control of Inspecteur Giraud, whose heavy footsteps echoed as he barked orders to his men. Photograph the body, the chalice, everything, and no one touches a thing until I say. His mustache bristled as he caught sight of Poirot. Monsieur Poirot, you are in my way. This is a police matter, not a game for amateurs. Poirot inclined his head, his smile serene but unyielding. Inspecteur, I am no amateur. Monsieur Dubois invited me here for a reason, and I shall assist whether you approve or not. The truth requires method, not merely authority. Giraud's scowl deepened, but he turned away, muttering to his sergeant about meddling foreigners. Poirot's attention returned to the table where the remaining chalices stood untouched, their contents glistening in the candlelight. Each was distinct, their engravings marking them as personal to their owners, a tradition Madame Dubois had explained to honor the chateau's heritage. Dubois's chalice, now in pieces, had been the grandest, its intricate design a testament to the family's legacy. Poirot's gaze lingered on the decanter, still half full of cuvée éclat. Hastings, he said softly. The wine was poured for all, yet only Dubois suffered. The poison was not in the decanter, it was in his chalice alone. Hastings nodded, though his brow furrowed. But Poirot, the sommelier, Moreau, poured every glass. Could he have slipped something in while no one was looking? Perhaps, Poirot mused, but such a sleight of hand requires boldness and precision under the eyes of a dozen guests. No, Hastings, we must consider the moments before the toast. Who approached the table? Who lingered near the chalice? He turned, his eyes sweeping the room, reconstructing the scene in his mind. The clinking glasses, the polite laughter, the fleeting glances. Madame Dubois, her face streaked with tears, remained near her husband's body, now covered with a cloth by Dr. Lefebvre. Poirot approached her gently, his voice soft as velvet. Madame, my deepest sympathies. But I must ask, your husband's chalice, it was special, oui? An heirloom? She nodded, her gray eyes hollow. Yes, Monsieur Poirot. It was his father's, and his father's before him. Etienne cherished it. He used it only for the most important tastings. Her voice broke, and she pressed a handkerchief to her lips. Who would do this? He had rivals, yes, but murder? Poirot's expression was one of profound compassion, though his mind remained razor-sharp. Madam, I will find the truth. Tell me, did anyone handle the chalice before the tasting? A servant, perhaps, or the sommelier? She shook her head. Philippe, Monsieur Moreau, prepared the chalices himself. He is meticulous, always insisting on cleaning them personally. Etienne trusted him completely. Her words faltered as if the thought of betrayal struck her anew. Merci, madame, Poirot said, bowing slightly. He turned to Hastings, his voice low. The sommelier, Hastings. His role is central. He controls the wine, the chalices. We must watch him closely. The parlor door opened, and Giraud's sergeant ushered the guests back into the tasting room for initial questioning. Laurent Garnier entered first, his lean frame taut, his sharp features set in a mask of concern. A tragedy, he said, his voice smooth but tinged with something Poirot could not yet place. Regret, or perhaps satisfaction. Mademoiselle Sophie Leroux followed, her silk gown rustling, her face pale but composed. She avoided looking at the covered body, her fingers twisting a pearl necklace. Philippe Moreau entered last, his movements as precise as ever, though Poirot noted a faint sheen of sweat on his brow, despite the coolness of the room. Giraud began his interrogations with characteristic bluntness, demanding alibis and accounts of the moments before the toast. Poirot, standing to one side, listened intently, his eyes never leaving the suspects. Garnier claimed he had been mingling with the wine merchants discussing trade, his chalice untouched until the toast. Leroux said she had been admiring the frescoes, distracted by their beauty, and had only taken her chalice when Moreau offered it. Moreau himself stated he had been at the table pouring the wine, his attention wholly on his duties. Each account was plausible, yet Poirot sensed the gaps, the unspoken truths hidden in their careful words. "Inspecteur," Poirot interjected, his tone polite but firm, "permit me to ask a question." Giraud's eyes narrowed, but he nodded curtly. Poirot turned to Moreau. "Monsieur, you poured the wine for all. Did you notice anything unusual about Monsieur Dubois' chalice? A mark? A flaw, perhaps?" Moreau's eyes met Poirot's, steady but guarded. "Non, monsieur, it was perfect, as always. I polished it myself this morning." His voice was calm, but Poirot detected a faint tremor, a crack in his polished facade. "And yet," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, "it is now in pieces. Curious, no?" He turned to Garnier. "Monsieur, you are a vintner. You know the value of a reputation. Did Monsieur Dubois threaten yours?" Garnier's smile was thin. "We were rivals, Monsieur Poirot, but I fight with quality, not poison. I was nowhere near his chalice." His words were confident, but his fingers drummed lightly on the table, a tell Poirot noted. Mademoiselle Leroux, when questioned, laughed nervously. "I am merely a guest, Monsieur Poirot. I came to taste wine, not to do this." Her eyes darted to the floor where the chalice's fragments lay. Poirot observed her closely, noting the way her hands clenched, betraying more than her words revealed. As Giraud resumed his questioning, Poirot drew Hastings aside once more. "Mon ami, the chalice is the key. Its destruction was no afterthought. It was part of the plan. We must discover who had access to it before the tasting and why it was singled out." He paused, his gaze returning to the shards. "And we must consider the poison. Cyanide is swift, but it requires preparation. Someone in this room knew exactly what they were doing." Hastings shuddered. "It's chilling, Poirot. To think one of them stood there toasting, knowing Dubois was about to die." He glanced at the suspects, now seated under Giraud's scrutiny. "Who do you suspect?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "All of them, Hastings, until the truth reveals itself, but the sommelier." His hands touched every chalice, and Garnier. His ambition burns brightly. As for Mademoiselle Leroux, her nervousness hides something. We shall see." He straightened, his eyes bright with purpose. "Come, mon ami, let us assist Inspecteur Giraud, whether he wishes it or not. The broken chalice will speak and Hercule Poirot will listen." As the police continued their work, Poirot's mind was already weaving the threads of the case: motive, opportunity, and the shattered symbol of a family's pride. The tasting room, with its elegance and its secrets, was now a battlefield, and Poirot was determined to uncover the truth hidden in its shadows. Chapter 4. The Suspects' Stories. The library of Chateau Lavigne was a haven of quiet opulence, its walls lined with leather-bound volumes and its air heavy with the scent of aged paper and polished wood. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the room, but the atmosphere was taut with suspicion. Hercule Poirot stood near a towering bookshelf, his small figure dwarfed by the grandeur, yet his presence commanded the space. His dark eyes, sharp and unyielding, observed the three suspects seated before him: Laurent Garnier, Sophie Leroux, and Philippe Moreau. Captain Hastings sat to one side, his notebook open, his pen poised to capture every word. Inspecteur Giraud, relegated to the background by Poirot's quiet insistence, paced near the door, his scowl a permanent fixture. The police had finished their preliminary search of the tasting room, and the guests had been moved to the library for questioning. Madame Claire Dubois, overcome with grief, had retired to her chambers, leaving Poirot to unravel the tangled threads of her husband's murder. The broken chalice, its fragments now collected by Giraud's men, remained at the forefront of Poirot's mind. Its deliberate destruction was a clue, a bold stroke in a carefully orchestrated crime. But to uncover the truth, he needed to probe the minds of those who had stood closest to Etienne Dubois in his final moments. "Monsieur Poirot," Giraud growled, breaking the silence, "I trust you will not waste my time with theatrics." "I have a murderer to catch." Poirot's mustache curved in a faint smile. "Inspecteur, the truth is never a waste of time. It requires only method and patience. Permit me to begin." He turned to the suspects, his voice soft but commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs, a man is dead, poisoned in a room full of witnesses. One of you knows more than you have said. I, Hercule Poirot, will find the truth. Let us start with you, Monsieur Garnier." Laurent Garnier, the rival vintner, leaned back in his chair, his lean frame relaxed but his eyes wary. His sharp features, accentuated by the firelight, gave him the air of a predator sizing up its prey. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice smooth as the wine he crafted, "I am a businessman, not a murderer. Etienne Dubois and I were rivals, yes, but rivalry is the lifeblood of our trade. I had no reason to kill him." Poirot's gaze was piercing. "No reason, monsieur. Yet I hear your vineyard struggles under the shadow of Chateau Lavigne. A man's ambition can curdle into desperation. Tell me, where were you before the toast? Did you approach the table, perhaps to admire the chalices?" Garnier's smile tightened. "I was with the wine merchants discussing exports. I never touched Dubois' chalice. I barely glanced at it." His fingers drummed lightly on the arm of his chair, a gesture Poirot noted with interest. "Ask anyone in the room. They'll confirm I was nowhere near the table when Moreau poured the wine." "Indeed," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. "And yet rivalry is a powerful motive. A man such as Dubois, with his reputation, his contracts, his success, could choke another's dreams, non?" Garnier's eyes flashed, but he said nothing, his silence a wall Poirot would chip away at in time. Poirot turned to Mademoiselle Sophie Leroux, who sat with her hands folded in her lap, her silk gown shimmering like liquid moonlight. Her face was composed, but her fingers twisted the edge of a lace handkerchief, betraying a nervous energy. "Mademoiselle," Poirot began, "you are a guest, a connoisseur of fine things, yet you seem unsettled. What brought you to Chateau Lavigne? And what did you see before the tragedy?" Leroux's laugh was light, almost forced. "Monsieur Poirot, I came for the wine, nothing more. Etienne's vintages are legendary, and I have a taste for the exceptional. I was admiring the frescoes when the toast began. I barely noticed the table until Philippe handed me my chalice. Her eyes flicked to the sommelier, then away, a movement so swift Poirot nearly missed it. Admiring the frescoes, Poirot repeated, his voice thoughtful. A curious distraction in a room buzzing with anticipation. Did you speak to Monsieur Dubois? Perhaps a word, a glance that might shed light? Her lips parted, then closed. We exchanged pleasantries earlier, nothing more. He was charming as always. Her voice wavered and Poirot's gray cells hummed. There was something she withheld, a secret lurking behind her polished exterior. Finally, Poirot turned to Philippe Moreau, the sommelier, whose black attire and precise posture gave him the air of a man who thrived on control. His hands, resting calmly on his knees, were steady, but Poirot noted a faint tightness in his jaw. Monsieur Moreau, Poirot said, you are the guardian of the wine, the master of the chalices. You poured for every guest, yet only Monsieur Dubois' chalice brought death. Tell me, how do you explain this? Moreau's expression remained impassive, his voice measured. Monsieur Poirot, I am a professional. I polished the chalices, filled them from the same decanter, and served them as I always do. I noticed nothing unusual. If there was poison, it was not by my hand. His words were smooth, rehearsed, but Poirot's eyes caught the briefest flicker of unease in his gaze. And the chalice, Poirot pressed, this heirloom of the Dubois family. You cleaned it yourself, oui. Did you inspect it closely? A crack, a residue, perhaps? Moreau's hands twitched almost imperceptibly. It was flawless, as always. I take pride in my work, Monsieur Poirot. The chalice was perfect when I placed it on the table. His tone was firm, but Poirot sensed a crack in his armor, a hint of something unspoken. Poirot stepped back, his hands clasped behind him, his mind weaving the threads of their stories. Merci, he said, his voice calm but resonant. You have each given me much to consider, but know this, the truth cannot hide from Hercule Poirot. It lies in the smallest of details, the tiniest of cracks. He turned to Giraud, who had stopped pacing to listen. Inspecteur, may I suggest you question the staff? Those who prepared the room, who saw the chalices before the tasting, they may hold a key. Giraud grunted, clearly reluctant to follow Poirot's lead, but he nodded to his sergeant. Do it! And search their belongings, bags, coats, everything. He shot Poirot a glare. Don't think you're running this show, Poirot. Poirot's smile was serene. I seek only the truth, Inspector. It is a pursuit we share, non? He turned to Hastings, who was scribbling furiously. Mon ami, what do you make of our suspects? Hastings looked up, his honest face creased with thought. Well, Poirot, Garnier's got motive, rivalry and all that, but he seems too clever to risk murder in public. Leroux is jumpy, like she's hiding something, but she's just a customer, isn't she? And Moreau, well, he's cool as a cucumber, but those hands of his, they poured the wine. If anyone could have done it, it's him. Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. Very good, Hastings. You see the surface, but we must dig deeper. Garnier's ambition is afire, but is it hot enough for murder? Leroux's nerves suggest a secret, perhaps personal, perhaps financial. And Moreau, his precision is his strength, but also his vulnerability. We must learn more. As Giraud's men began questioning the staff, Poirot approached the fireplace, his gaze distant. The library, with its rows of books and flickering shadows, was a fitting stage for the drama unfolding. Each suspect had told a story, but none rang entirely true. Garnier's denial was too polished, Leroux's unease too pronounced, Moreau's calm too practiced. The broken chalice, the poison, the fleeting glances in the tasting room. These were the pieces of a puzzle Poirot was determined to solve. He turned to Hastings, his voice low. "Mon ami, we must watch them closely. The murderer is among them, and they know we are watching. They will make a mistake, and when they do, Hercule Poirot will be ready." The fire crackled, casting long shadows across the room, and Poirot's mind, ever methodical, began to trace the contours of a crime as intricate as the engravings on the Vanished Chalice. Chapter 5. The sommelier's precision. The tasting room of Château Lavigne, now stripped of its festive air, stood silent under the scrutiny of Inspecteur Giraud's men. The chandeliers cast a muted glow over the oak table where the remaining chalices stood like sentinels, their crystal surfaces unmarred save for the absence of Etienne Dubois' shattered heirloom. Hercule Poirot lingered in the room after the suspects had been dismissed to their quarters, his small figure a solitary silhouette against the grandeur. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, hovered nearby, his face a mixture of awe and unease as he watched Poirot's meticulous examination of the scene. The scent of wine and tragedy lingered, a potent reminder of the crime that had unfolded mere hours before. Poirot's attention was fixed on the table where the chalices gleamed in the candlelight. Each bore unique engravings, vines, crests, and floral motifs, marking them as personal to their owners, a tradition Madame Dubois had described with pride. The absence of Dubois' chalice, its fragments now bagged and catalogued by Giraud's team, was a void that drew Poirot's gaze. He moved with deliberate grace, his gloved hands tracing the air above the table as if reconstructing the moments before the fatal toast. "Hastings," he said, his voice soft but resonant, "the chalice is the heart of this mystery. Its destruction was no accident but a stroke of intent. And who better to wield such intent than the man who handled every chalice?" Hastings frowned, his honest face creasing with thought. "You mean Moreau, the sommelier? But Poirot, he's so precise. Every move he made was like a ballet. Could a man that careful be so reckless as to poison someone in front of us all?" "Précisément, mon ami," Poirot replied, his mustache twitching. "It is his very precision that makes him suspect. A man who polishes crystal with such care, who pours wine with such grace, he does not act without purpose. We must understand his role, his access, his secrets." Poirot's eyes gleamed as he approached the spot where Dubois had fallen, the floor now marked by chalk where the body had lain. The shattered chalice's fragments had been removed, but Poirot's memory held their image, the jagged edges, the deliberate force of their breaking. He turned to the decanter, still half full of cuvée éclat, its ruby liquid untouched by the police. "The wine," Poirot murmured, "it was poured for all, yet only Dubois suffered. The poison was in his chalice alone, placed there by a hand that knew its target." He leaned closer, inspecting the decanter's crystal surface, but found no trace of tampering. "The sommelier poured from this. If he is guilty, his method was subtle, hidden in plain sight." Hastings shifted, glancing toward the door where Giraud's men were interviewing the chateau's staff. "But Poirot, how could Moreau do it with everyone watching? And why break the chalice? Wouldn't that draw more attention?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "To break is to distract, Hastings. A shattered chalice shifts the eye from the poison to the accident. It is a sleight of hand, a misdirection. But we shall not be misled. He straightened, his gaze sweeping the room. Come, let us speak to the staff. They see what the guests do, not the small moments, the hidden actions. They found the chateau's housekeeper, Madame Lefebvre, in the servants' quarters, a stout woman with a lined face and eyes red from crying. She had served the Dubois family for decades and was shaken by her master's death. Poirot approached her with the gentleness of a priest, his voice soothing. Madame, you have my sympathies, but I must ask, did you see Monsieur Moreau prepare the chalices today? His routine, was it as always? Madame Lefebvre dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. Oui, Monsieur Poirot, Philippe is meticulous. He cleaned the chalices in the pantry this morning, as he always does before a tasting. He uses a special cloth, his own, and polishes them until they shine. He insisted on doing it alone. Said it was his duty. Her voice trembled. I never thought. Could he have done this? Poirot's expression remained impassive, but his mind was racing. A special cloth, you say? And where is this cloth kept? In his quarters, I believe, she replied. He's very particular about his tools. No one else touches them. She hesitated, then added, he was in the tasting room early, before the guests arrived. Said he needed to arrange the table. Merci, madame, Poirot said, bowing slightly. He turned to Hastings, his eyes bright. The cloth, Hastings. It may hold a clue. And his presence in the room before the tasting? Opportunité, no? He gestured toward the corridor. Let us visit Monsieur Moreau's quarters. Discreetly, of course, the sommelier's room was a study in order, its sparse furnishings arranged with military precision. A narrow bed, a desk, and a locked cabinet were the only adornments. Poirot, with a nod to Hastings, produced a small tool from his pocket, a testament to his preparedness, and deftly opened the cabinet. Inside, among neatly folded linens, was a stack of polishing cloths, one slightly apart from the others, its edge faintly discolored. Poirot lifted it with gloved hands, holding it to the light. A faint chemical scent, barely detectable, clung to the fabric. Curious, he murmured. This must be tested, but I suspect it is not mere polish. Hastings' eyes widened. You think he used it to apply the poison? But how? The chalice was clean when he poured the wine. Perhaps, Poirot said, the poison was not in the wine but on the chalice itself. A residue applied with care activated by the wine's touch. It is a method both bold and subtle. He wrapped the cloth carefully in a handkerchief and tucked it into his pocket. We shall have this analyzed, but we must move with care. Monsieur Moreau is no fool as they return to the tasting room. Poirot's thoughts turned to the sommelier's demeanor during the questioning. Moreau's calm, his polished responses had been almost too perfect, like a performance rehearsed to the last detail. Yet the tremor in his hands, the fleeting glance when asked about the chalice, these were cracks in his facade. Poirot's gray cells hummed, piecing together the puzzle. The sommelier had access, opportunity, and a method that fit his meticulous nature. But why? What drove a man of such precision to risk murder? They found Inspecteur Giraud in the tasting room overseeing the collection of the remaining chalices. He glared at Poirot's approach. What now, Poirot? Found another theory to complicate my investigation? Poirot's smile was serene. Merely a suggestion, Inspecteur. Have the chalices tested for residue, not just the wine, but the crystal itself. And perhaps, he added, producing the cloth with a flourish, this may interest your laboratory. It was found in Monsieur Moreau's quarters. Giraud's eyes narrowed, but he took the cloth, barking an order to his sergeant. Test it, and the chalices. If there's poison, we'll find it. He turned back to Poirot, grudging respect flickering in his gaze. You're thorough, I'll give you that. But don't think you're ahead of me. I seek only the truth, Inspecteur, Poirot replied, his tone mild. And the truth lies in the details. He turned to Hastings, who was watching with barely concealed admiration. Mon ami, we have a thread to follow. The sommelier's precision is his strength, but it may also be his undoing. We must learn more, his habits, his loyalties, his secrets. As the night deepened, the chateau seemed to close in around them, its elegance a mask for the darkness within. Poirot stood by the tasting room's windows, gazing out at the shadowed vineyards, the broken chalice, the poisoned wine, the sommelier's steady hands. These were the pieces of a puzzle that was beginning to take shape. Hastings, he said softly, the murderer is clever, but no one is cleverer than Hercule Poirot. We shall find them, and the truth will shine like the crystal they sought to shatter. Chapter 6. A Rival's Ambition. The morning sun cast a golden veil over the vineyards of Chateau Lavigne, its rays piercing the mist that clung to the rolling hills. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his tailored suit, strolled through the rows of vines, his polished shoes leaving faint impressions in the dew-kissed earth. Beside him walked Laurent Garnier, the rival vintner, his lean frame taut with a restlessness that belied his polished exterior. Captain Hastings trailed a few steps behind, his notebook tucked under his arm, his eyes darting between the two men. The air was crisp, scented with the earthy tang of grapes and the promise of a harvest. But Poirot's mind was far from the pastoral beauty. He was here to probe the heart of a man whose ambition he suspected might have driven him to murder. Monsieur Garnier, Poirot began, his voice smooth as the wine they discussed, you have a fine estate of your own. Yet you walk the vines of your rival. Tell me, what is it to compete with a man like Etienne Dubois? His cuvée éclat was to be a triumph, no? A triumph that might eclipse your own. Garnier's sharp features tightened, his smile a thin line. Monsieur Poirot, competition is the soul of our trade. Dubois was a giant, yes, but giants cast long shadows. My wines are gaining ground. My Reserve d'Or won praise in Paris last year. I had no need to kill him to prove my worth. His tone was confident, but his eyes, glinting like steel in the sunlight, betrayed a flicker of unease. Poirot paused beside a gnarled vine, his gloved hand brushing a leaf with delicate precision. And yet, shadows can suffocate, monsieur. I have heard whispers, your contracts falter, your buyers turn to Chateau Lavigne. A man of ambition might find such setbacks intolerable. He fixed Garnier with a piercing gaze, his mustache twitching slightly. Garnier's laugh was sharp, almost brittle. Whispers, Monsieur Poirot? The wine trade thrives on gossip. Yes, Dubois blocked a deal with a London merchant last month. His influence was vast. But I fight with quality, not daggers, or poison for that matter. He gestured to the vines around them. This is my battleground here in the earth, not in a tasting room. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. A noble sentiment. But let us speak of the tasting room. You were there mingling, oui? Yet you claim you never approached the table, never touched the chalice. Tell me, did you see anyone else near it? A glance, a movement, perhaps? Garnier's fingers adjusted his cufflink, a gesture Poirot noted as deliberate, a shield against scrutiny. I was with the merchants, as I said. My eyes were on them, not the table. Moreau poured the wine. Leroux was fussing with her gown. Claire Dubois was hovering near her husband. I saw nothing unusual. His voice was steady, but his gaze flicked briefly to the chateau as if seeking escape. Curious, Poirot murmured, resuming his stroll. You are observant, monsieur, yet you saw nothing. A man of your acumen, so focused on trade, misses nothing in a room of rivals. He stopped, turning to face Garnier directly. I have learned you visited Chateau Lavigne 3 days ago. A meeting with Monsieur Dubois, oui? What was discussed? Garnier's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching faintly. A business matter. I proposed a merger. Our estates, combined, could dominate the market. Dubois laughed it off, said his legacy stood alone. It was a civil meeting, nothing more. His words were clipped, his composure fraying at the edges. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A civil rejection, yet a rejection all the same. A man's pride, wounded, can fester into something darker. And you, Monsieur Garnier, are a man of pride, no? He stepped closer, his voice soft but relentless. Did you see the chalice during your visit? Did you perhaps linger in the tasting room? Garnier's laugh was cold. You reach, Monsieur Poirot. I was in the library with Dubois, nowhere near the tasting room. Ask Claire. She was there pouring tea. I left that day and returned only for the tasting. His alibi was firm, but Poirot's gray cells were already at work, sifting through the layers of truth and evasion. Hastings, catching up, whispered, He's got an answer for everything, Poirot. But that business about the merger sounds like Dubois rubbed him the wrong way. Oui, Hastings, Poirot replied softly, his eyes still on Garnier, who had turned to inspect a vine with exaggerated interest. A man scorned in business is as dangerous as one scorned in love. But his alibi, it is too perfect, too rehearsed. We must verify it. He turned to Garnier, his tone polite but probing. Monsieur, you use cyanide in your vineyard, do you not? For pests, perhaps. Garnier's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. Many vintners do, Monsieur Poirot. It's common for rodents in the cellars, but I keep none here, and I certainly didn't carry it to the tasting. His voice held a trace of indignation, but Poirot noted the slight flush in his cheeks. Naturellement, Poirot said, his smile disarming. I merely seek to understand. Merci for your time, Monsieur Garnier. We shall speak again. He bowed slightly, signaling the end of the conversation. Garnier nodded curtly and strode back toward the chateau, his steps brisk, as if eager to escape Poirot's scrutiny. As they walked back through the vines, Hastings shook his head. He's slippery, Poirot. All that talk of rivalry and mergers, do you think he's our man? Poirot's gaze was distant, his mind weaving the threads of the case. Garnier has motive, Hastings, ambition, resentment, a rival's triumph to thwart. But the method, the chalice, the poison requires a hand more intimate with the tasting room. Garnier was not there before the event, or so he claims. We must confirm with Madame Dubois. He paused, his eyes scanning the horizon. And yet his knowledge of cyanide is telling. A man such as he does not act alone. He plans, he delegates. They reached the chateau's gravel drive, where Inspecteur Giraud was overseeing the unloading of equipment for the ongoing investigation. He spotted Poirot and approached, his mustache bristling. Well, Poirot, chasing shadows in the vineyards? My men have searched the tasting room. Nothing but wine and crystal. The poison came from that chalice, I'm sure of it. Poirot nodded, his expression serene. A point we agree on, Inspector. But the chalice was prepared, the poison placed by a hand with access. Have you questioned the staff about Monsieur Garnier's visit 3 days ago? Giraud's eyes narrowed. You think he planned this, then? He's a rival, yes, but he wasn't near the chalice during the tasting. His alibi checks out. Merchants saw him across the room. He folded his arms, defiant. You're fishing, Poirot. Non, Inspecteur, Poirot replied, his voice calm but firm. I am building. The truth is a mosaic, and each piece must fit. Garnier's ambition is a piece, but not the whole. We must look to those who touched the chalice. Moreau, perhaps, or another. He turned to Hastings. Mon ami, we shall speak to Madame Dubois. She was present at this meeting. She may hold the key to Garnier's truth. As they entered the chateau, the weight of the mystery pressed upon them. The vineyards, so serene in the morning light, hid a darkness that Poirot was determined to uncover. Garnier's ambition was a fire burning bright, but was it hot enough to kill? The answer lay in the shadows of Chateau Lavigne, and Hercule Poirot, with his unerring method, would bring it to light. Chapter 7. The Customer's Secret. The parlor of Chateau Lavigne was a cocoon of elegance, its walls adorned with delicate tapestries depicting pastoral scenes, their colors softened by time. A low fire burned in the marble fireplace, casting flickering shadows across the room, where Mademoiselle Sophie Leroux sat perched on a velvet-upholstered chair. Her silk gown, a cascade of midnight blue, shimmered faintly, but her poise was marred by the nervous twist of her fingers around a pearl-encrusted fan. Hercule Poirot, standing near a rosewood table, observed her with the keenness of a hawk, his dark eyes noting every tremble, every fleeting glance. Captain Hastings, seated nearby with his notebook open, watched with a mixture of sympathy and suspicion, his pen poised to capture the nuances of the conversation. The morning's interrogation of Laurent Garnier had left Poirot with a clearer picture of ambition's sharp edges, but the puzzle of Etienne Dubois' murder remained incomplete. Sophie Leroux, the Parisian heiress with a taste for luxury, was an enigma. A guest whose presence at the tasting seemed innocuous, yet whose unease hinted at deeper currents. Poirot had requested this private audience away from Inspector Giraud's brusque interrogations to probe the secrets she guarded so carefully. Mademoiselle Leroux, Poirot began, his voice soft as the rustle of silk. You are a woman of refinement, drawn to the finest things, wine, art, beauty. Yet at Chateau Lavigne, you are not at ease. Tell me what brought you here beyond the allure of cuvée éclat. Leroux's lips curved in a practiced smile, but her eyes remained wary. Monsieur Poirot, I am a connoisseur, nothing more. Etienne Dubois' vintages are renowned, and I never miss a chance to indulge in excellence. The tasting was a social event, a delight, until... Her voice faltered, and she glanced toward the window where the vineyard stretched under a pale autumn sky. Until death intruded. Poirot finished, his tone gentle but unrelenting. A tragedy, oui, but one that leaves questions. You were near the table when the toast began, yet you claim to have seen nothing. No hand near the chalice, no suspicious act. A woman of your observation, mademoiselle, surely notices more than she admits. Her fingers tightened around the fan, its delicate frame creaking faintly. I was distracted, Monsieur Poirot. The frescoes, the guests. I was caught up in the moment. I took my chalice from Monsieur Moreau and joined the toast. That is all. Her voice was steady, but her eyes darted to the door as if expecting an interruption. Poirot stepped closer, his small frame radiating quiet authority. Distracted, perhaps, but not blind. You knew Monsieur Dubois, did you not? More than a casual acquaintance, I think. There is a tension in you, mademoiselle, a secret that weighs heavily. Share it with Hercule Poirot, and perhaps we may lighten your burden. Leroux's composure wavered, her shoulders stiffening. You presume too much, monsieur. I was a guest, a customer. Etienne was charming, a gracious host. We had no personal connection. Her words were clipped, her gaze fixed on the fire, avoiding Poirot's scrutiny. Hastings, unable to restrain himself, leaned forward. But mademoiselle, you seemed so shaken when Dubois collapsed. More than the others, I'd say. Was there something between you? A quarrel, perhaps? Poirot raised a hand, silencing Hastings with a glance. Mon ami, let us not leap to romance. There are many kinds of secrets. He turned back to Leroux, his voice softening. Mademoiselle, I have learned you invested in Chateau Lavigne. A significant sum, oui? A business arrangement with Monsieur Dubois. Tell me, was this investment as harmonious as you suggest? Her eyes widened, a flash of panic betraying her. How did you— Yes, I invested. Etienne's wines were a sure return, a safe venture. I trusted his vision. She hesitated, her fan snapping shut. But there was no trouble. We were in agreement. Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign his gray cells were at work. And yet I hear whispers of discord. A maid tidying the library overheard raised voices, Monsieur Dubois and a woman days before the tasting. She spoke of funds, of promises broken. Was that you, mademoiselle? Leroux's face paled, her fingers trembling. You have no right to pry into my affairs, Monsieur Poirot. Yes, we argued. Etienne planned to redirect my investment to a new venture, a risky one, without my consent. I was upset. But I did not kill him. Her voice rose, a note of desperation breaking through her polished facade. Poirot nodded, his expression one of profound understanding. Naturellement, mademoiselle. A woman of your standing does not resort to poison, but your anger, it gives us a thread to follow. Did you share this grievance with anyone? Monsieur Garnier, perhaps, or Monsieur Moreau? She shook her head vehemently. No one. It was private. I confronted Etienne alone in the library. I left the next day and returned only for the tasting. Her eyes met Poirot's, pleading. I had no access to his chalice, Monsieur Poirot. I am no murderer. Poirot stepped back, his hands clasped behind him. Merci, mademoiselle. Your candor is illuminating. But know this, the truth hides in the shadows of such secrets. If you withhold more, it will come to light. He bowed slightly, signaling the end of the interview. As Leroux rose, her gown rustling, she paused at the door, her voice barely a whisper. I loved his wines, Monsieur Poirot. That is all she slipped out, leaving a faint scent of jasmine in her wake. Hastings closed his notebook, his brow furrowed. Good Lord, Poirot, she's hiding something, isn't she? That argument, its motive, plain as day. But how could she get to the chalice? She wasn't near it before. The tasting, Poirot's eyes gleamed. Motive, oui, but opportunity. That is the question, Hastings. Mademoiselle Leroux is no fool. She knows her wealth and charm shield her, but her nerves betray her. This argument, this investment, it adds a piece to our puzzle. But the chalice, the poison, these required a hand closer to the scene. He paced slowly, his mind a whirl of connections. We must verify her story with the maid, and we must consider, did her anger inspire another to act? They stepped into the corridor where the chateau's quiet elegance seemed to mock the violence that had shattered its peace. Poirot's thoughts turned to the other suspects. Laurent Garnier's ambition was a fire, Philippe Moreau's precision a blade, but Sophie Leroux's secret added a new dimension, a financial stake, a betrayal, a motive that simmered beneath her polished surface. Yet her access to the chalice was limited, her role in the tasting room peripheral. Could she have conspired with another? The sommelier, perhaps, or even Garnier? As they approached the library to seek the maid, Inspector Giraud intercepted them, his face a mask of irritation. Poirot, you're stirring up trouble. My men have questioned the staff, nothing new. The chalice was clean, the wine untouched until Moreau poured it. You're chasing ghosts? Poirot's smile was serene. Non, Inspecteur. I chase the truth. Mademoiselle Leroux has revealed a quarrel with Dubois, a matter of money, of trust broken. I suggest you confirm with the maid who overheard it. And perhaps, he added, his tone deceptively mild, you might inquire if she saw Mademoiselle Leroux near the tasting room before her departure. Giraud's eyes narrowed, but he nodded curtly. I'll check. But don't think you're running this, Poirot. He stormed off, barking orders to his sergeant. Hastings shook his head. He's a tough nut, that Giraud. But you've got him thinking, Poirot. Do you really believe Leroux could be involved? Poirot's gaze was distant, his mind weaving the threads of the case. She is a piece of the puzzle, Hastings, but not the whole. Her anger is real, her secret potent, but the chalice, the poison, points to another hand. We must find the link, the moment where motive meets opportunity. He straightened, his eyes bright with purpose. Come, mon ami. The maid awaits, and with her perhaps the next clue to the vanished chalice. Chapter 8. The clue in the cellar. The wine cellar of Chateau Lavigne was a labyrinth of shadow and scent, its stone walls cool and damp, lined with racks of oak barrels that exuded the rich, earthy aroma of aging vintages. The air was heavy with the tang of fermentation, undercut by a faint mustiness that spoke of centuries past. Hercule Poirot descended the narrow stone steps with measured grace, his polished shoes clicking softly, a stark contrast to the rugged surroundings. Captain Hastings followed, his face a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, his lantern casting flickering light across the vaulted ceiling. The cellar, vast and silent, seemed to hold its breath, as if guarding the secrets of the murder that had shaken the chateau. Poirot had insisted on this exploration after his interview with Sophie Leroux, her revelation of a financial quarrel with Etienne Dubois adding a new thread to the tapestry of the case. The broken chalice, the poisoned wine, the sommelier's precision, the rival's ambition, and now the heiress's secret. All were pieces of a puzzle that Poirot's gray cells were tirelessly assembling. But the cellar, where the cuvée éclat had been stored and the chalices prepared, beckoned as a potential repository of truth. Hastings, Poirot said, his voice a low murmur that echoed faintly. The heart of a vineyard is its cellar. Here secrets are kept, not just of wine, but of men. Hastings shivered, his lantern swaying. It's a bit eerie, Poirot. All these barrels, this darkness. Feels like we're hunting ghosts. What are we looking for exactly? Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. Evidence, mon ami. A trace of the poison, a sign of tampering. The chalice was poisoned, the wine untouched. This cellar may hold the moment where the crime was born. He moved deeper into the labyrinth, his small frame navigating the narrow aisles with the precision of a cat. The barrels, stacked high, bore the Dubois crest, their wood darkened by years of service. Poirot's gloved hand brushed lightly against one, his mind alert for any anomaly. Near a corner where the shadows were thickest, Poirot paused. A small wooden table stood against the wall, cluttered with tools of the vintner's trade. Corkscrews, decanters, and a stack of linens used for polishing. Among them, half hidden beneath a cloth, was a crumpled rag, its edges frayed and faintly stained. Poirot lifted it with delicate care, holding it to the lantern's light. A sharp chemical scent clung to it, distinct from the cellar's organic bouquet. Curieux, he murmured, his eyes narrowing. This is not the scent of wine or polish. Hastings leaned closer, his nose wrinkling. Good Lord, Poirot, is that cyanide? Could it be the poison? Poirot's gaze was intense. Perhaps, Hastings. We must have it tested, but I suspect this rag is a link to our murderer. It was used, I think, to apply the poison to the chalice, a subtle touch hidden in the act of cleaning. He wrapped the rag carefully in a handkerchief and tucked it into his pocket, his mind racing. The sommelier, Monsieur Moreau, polished the chalices here. This rag may be his tool or another's placed to mislead. As they continued their search, Poirot's eyes caught a wooden crate tucked beneath a rack, its surface marked with a different crest. Not the Dubois vine, but a stylized hawk, the emblem of Laurent Garnier's estate. He knelt, examining the crate with meticulous care. It contained empty bottles, their labels bearing Garnier's name, likely a gift or sample delivered during his visit 3 days prior. Interesting, Poirot said, his voice thoughtful. Monsieur Garnier's presence lingers even here. A gift, he claimed, but perhaps a pretext. Hastings frowned, crouching beside him. You think Garnier left this as a cover? To sneak into the cellar and tamper with the chalice? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. It is possible, Hastings. A man with ambition may seize any opportunity, but the chalice was prepared by Moreau, not Garnier. We must consider, did they act together? Or is this crate a distraction, like the broken chalice itself? He rose, brushing his gloves with a fastidious flick. We shall ask Monsieur Garnier about this crate, and we shall test the rag. The truth is near, mon ami. They ascended from the cellar, the lantern's light fading as they emerged into the chateau's corridor. Inspecteur Giraud was waiting, his broad frame filling the doorway, his mustache bristling with impatience. Poirot, what now? Skulking in the cellar like a rat? My men have searched every inch, nothing but wine and dust. Poirot produced the rag with a flourish, its faint chemical scent now masked by his handkerchief. Inspector, I suggest your laboratory examine this. It was found in the cellar where the chalices were prepared. And this crate, he gestured to a photograph Hastings had taken, bears Monsieur Garnier's crest. A coincidence, perhaps, but Hercule Poirot does not believe in coincidences. Giraud's eyes narrowed. but he took the rag, barking an order to his sergeant. "Test it, and check the crate's contents, every bottle, every splinter." He turned to Poirot, grudging respect warring with irritation. "You're thorough, I'll give you that. But if this is nothing, you're wasting my time." "Non, Inspecteur," Poirot replied, his tone serene. "Time spent on the truth is never wasted. The rag, the crate, these are threads in our tapestry. Weave them carefully, and the murderer will be revealed." He turned to Hastings, his eyes bright. "Mon ami, we must speak to Madame Dubois again. She may know of Garnier's visit to the cellar, or of Moreau's habits there." As they moved toward the parlor, Hastings whispered, "Poirot, this is getting tangled. Garnier's crate, Moreau's rag, Leroux's quarrel, how do they fit?" Poirot's gaze was distant, his mind a whirl of connections. "They fit, Hastings, because they must. The cellar is the stage where the crime was prepared. The rag suggests Moreau, the crate points to Garnier, and Leroux's secret adds motive. But the chalice, its breaking, was the final act of misdirection. We are close, mon ami, to the truth," he straightened, his small frame radiating purpose. "Come. We shall find Madame Dubois, and the cellar's secrets will lead us to the killer. The chateau, with its elegant facade and hidden depths, seemed to watch them as they moved through its halls. The clue in the cellar, small but potent, was a step toward unraveling the mystery of the vanished chalice. And Hercule Poirot, with his unerring method, was determined to follow it to its end. Chapter 9. The Sommelier's Confession. The tasting room of Chateau Lavigne, once a stage for celebration, now stood as a somber arena for truth. The late afternoon light filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the oak table where the remaining chalices gleamed, their crystal surfaces untouched since the fatal toast. Hercule Poirot stood at the room's center, his small figure commanding despite the vastness around him. His dark eyes, sharp and unyielding, fixed on Philippe Moreau, the sommelier, who stood rigidly by the table, his black attire as pristine as ever. Captain Hastings lingered near the door, his notebook open, his face a mixture of anticipation and unease. Inspecteur Giraud, relegated to the sidelines, watched with a scowl, his impatience palpable as Poirot prepared to unravel the threads of the mystery. The discovery of the chemical-scented rag in the cellar had sharpened Poirot's focus on Moreau, whose precision and access to the chalices made him a pivotal figure in the murder of Etienne Dubois. The rival vintner, Laurent Garnier, and the heiress Sophie Leroux had revealed their motives, ambition and betrayal. But the act itself, the poison in the chalice, pointed to a hand intimate with the tasting room's rituals. Poirot had requested this confrontation, sensing that Moreau's polished facade was beginning to crack under the weight of scrutiny. "Monsieur Moreau," Poirot began, his voice soft but resonant, cutting through the room's stillness. "You are a man of order, of method. Your hands poured the wine, polished the chalices, set the stage for Monsieur Dubois' final moment. Yet that moment was one of death, and the chalice, his chalice, was shattered. Tell me why." Moreau's face remained impassive, his hands clasped before him, steady as stone. "Monsieur Poirot, I have told you I poured the wine from the same decanter for all. The chalice was perfect when I placed it on the table. Its breaking was an accident, a tragedy I could not foresee." His voice was smooth, practiced, but Poirot's keen eyes caught a faint tremor in his fingers, a shadow of unease in his gaze. Poirot stepped closer, his movements deliberate, his tone deceptively mild. An accident, you say? Non, monsieur. The chalice was shattered with force, its fragments scattered to obscure the truth. And this? He produced the wrapped rag from his pocket, holding it aloft like a talisman. This was found in the cellar where you prepared the chalices. It bears the scent of cyanide, a poison not easily mistaken. Explain this, if you please, Moreau's. Composure faltered, his eyes widening for a fleeting moment before he regained control. That rag is not mine, he said, his voice firm but strained. I use only my own cloths, kept in my quarters. Someone must have placed it there to implicate me. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign his gray cells were at work. Someone, monsieur? A convenient phantom. Yet you alone had access to the chalices before the tasting. You polished them, you placed them, you poured the wine, and the chalice of Monsieur Dubois, etched with his family's crest, was poisoned. Why did you break it? Moreau's hands clenched, the first overt sign of agitation. I broke it to protect the chateau's reputation, he stammered, his voice rising. It was cracked. I noticed it during the tasting. I feared it would taint the wine, ruin the event. I struck it against the table after Dubois fell to prevent scandal. His words tumbled out, a mixture of defiance and desperation, but Poirot's gaze remained unrelenting. A cracked chalice, Poirot repeated, his tone laced with skepticism. A man of your precision, monsieur, would not miss such a flaw when polishing. No. You broke it to hide the poison, to scatter the evidence. But the rag betrays you, as does your fear. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. And then there is the matter of your finances. A sommelier's salary is modest, yet your bank holds deposits far beyond your means. From whom, monsieur? Who paid you to betray your master? Moreau's face paled, his hands trembling visibly now. You have no proof, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I am loyal to Chateau Lavigne. I would never... Enough! Poirot's voice, though soft, cut like a blade. You lie, monsieur. The deposits traced to an account linked to Monsieur Garnier. A rival, desperate to eclipse Dubois, paid you to sabotage the tasting. But sabotage became murder, did it not? You applied the cyanide to the chalice, knowing Dubois alone would drink from it. You broke it to conceal your crime, but Hercule Poirot sees through your deception. Moreau staggered back, his mask crumbling. I didn't mean to kill him, he cried, his voice breaking. Garnier paid me to ruin the tasting, spill wine, break a glass, make a scene, but the poison... I didn't know it was cyanide. I thought it was a harmless chemical to taint the wine's flavor. I swear I didn't intend murder. His hands covered his face, his shoulders shaking as the confession poured forth. Hastings gasped, his notebook nearly slipping from his grasp. Good Lord, Poirot, you've done it. He's admitted it. Poirot raised a hand, silencing Hastings. Not all, mon ami. Monsieur Moreau, you claim innocence, yet you chose the chalice, you applied the poison. Who supplied it? Speak the truth, or the gallows will. Moreau's voice was a whisper, his eyes haunted. Garnier. He gave me a vial, said it was safe, just to spoil the wine. I didn't ask questions, I needed the money, my debts. He trailed off, his head bowing in defeat. Giraud, who had been listening with growing astonishment, stepped forward, his scowl replaced by grim satisfaction. You're under arrest, Moreau, he barked, gesturing to his sergeant, and we'll have Garnier in cuffs by nightfall. He turned to Poirot, grudging respect in his eyes. "You're a devil, Poirot, but you've got him." Poirot's expression remained serene, though his mind was still at work. "The truth is not yet complete, Inspecteur. Moreau's confession is a step, but Garnier's role must be confirmed, and Mademoiselle Leroux, her secret may yet connect." He turned to Hastings, his eyes bright. "Mon ami, we are close, but the puzzle is not finished. The sommelier's hands were the tool, but the mind behind them, c'est la clé." As Moreau was led away, his head bowed, the tasting room seemed to exhale, its shadows deepening. The confession had cracked the case open, but Poirot knew the final pieces awaited. The vanished chalice, its fragments a silent witness, had begun to speak, and Hercule Poirot was determined to hear its full story. Chapter 10. The Competitor's Game. The library of Chateau Lavigne, with its towering shelves and the soft crackle of a fire in the hearth, was a fitting stage for the next act in Hercule Poirot's unraveling of Etienne Dubois' murder. The late afternoon light filtered through heavy velvet curtains, casting a muted glow over the leather-bound volumes and the polished rosewood table where Laurent Garnier now sat. His lean frame was taut, his sharp features set in a mask of defiance, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Hercule Poirot stood before him, his small figure radiating quiet authority, his dark eyes piercing as they studied the rival vintner. Captain Hastings, seated to one side, clutched his notebook, his face alight with anticipation. Inspector Giraud, looming near the door, watched with a mixture of skepticism and grudging curiosity, his mustache twitching as Poirot prepared to confront the man whose ambition had fueled a deadly scheme. Philippe Moreau's confession in the tasting room had cast a bright light on the crime, implicating Garnier as the mastermind who supplied the poison. The sommelier's admission that he had been paid to sabotage the tasting, unaware the vial contained cyanide, pointed directly to Garnier's motive, to destroy Dubois' reputation and secure his own vineyard's dominance. Yet Poirot knew the truth was a mosaic, and Garnier's role required careful scrutiny to complete the picture. The broken chalice, the chemical-scented rag, and now Moreau's trembling words were pieces that must fit perfectly. "Monsieur Garnier," Poirot began, his voice soft but resonant, cutting through the library's stillness. "You are a man of ambition, a vintner who dreams of surpassing Chateau Lavigne. Yet your dreams were thwarted by Etienne Dubois, a giant whose shadow darkened your path. Tell me, did you believe that poisoning his chalice would clear that path?" Garnier's laugh was sharp, almost derisive, but his fingers drummed lightly on the table until Poirot noted, "Monsieur Poirot, you weave a fine tale, but I am no murderer. Yes, I paid Moreau to disrupt the tasting, a spilled glass, a tainted flavor, nothing more. A petty act to dim Dubois' star. But cyanide? Murder? You mistake me for a monster." His voice was smooth, his smile calculated, but his eyes darted to the door as if measuring an escape. Poirot stepped closer, his hands clasped behind him, his gaze unrelenting. "A mistake, monsieur?" "Non. The evidence speaks. A crate bearing your crest was found in the cellar where the chalices were prepared. A rag, scented with cyanide, was discovered there, a tool of the crime. And Monsieur Moreau, your accomplice, has confessed to receiving a vial from you, a vial he believed would merely spoil the wine. Yet it killed. Explain this, if you please." Garnier's composure wavered, his sharp features tightening. "The crate was a gift, bottles of my reserve d'or sent as a gesture of goodwill. As for the rag, I know nothing of it. Moreau is lying, covering his own guilt. He's the one who poured the wine, who broke the chalice. Why point to me? His voice rose, a note of indignation masking fear. Poirot's mustache twitched, his gray cells weaving the threads of the case. You deny the vial, monsieur? Yet Moreau's bank holds your payments, sums far beyond a sommelier's means. You sought to ruin Dubois, to shatter his triumph with cuvée éclat. But your plan was bolder, was it not? Poison swift and silent to ensure he could never rise again. Garnier leaned forward, his eyes blazing. You have no proof, Poirot. Payments, yes. I admit to hiring Moreau for a prank, a small sabotage. But I am a vintner, not a chemist. Cyanide? I use it for pests, as do many, but I didn't supply it. Moreau must have acted alone or with another. His words were fervent, but Poirot noted the slight flush in his cheeks, the quickening of his breath. Hastings, unable to contain himself, interjected. But Garnier, you had every reason to want Dubois gone. Your vineyard was losing ground. Dubois blocked your deals, laughed at your merger. Why should we believe you didn't plan this? Poirot raised a hand, silencing Hastings with a glance. Mon ami, let us not rush. Monsieur Garnier, you are correct. Proof is needed, but consider this. You know cyanide, its uses, its potency. You visited Chateau Lavigne days before the tasting, a meeting Madame Dubois confirms. Did you perhaps linger in the cellar? Did you see the chalices or speak with Moreau? Garnier's jaw clenched, his fingers stilling. I was in the library with Dubois, as I told you. I saw no chalices, spoke to no one else. Claire will confirm it. She was there. His voice was firm, but Poirot sensed a crack in his armor, a hesitation that betrayed more than his words. Indeed, Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. Yet the crate in the cellar suggests otherwise. A gift, you say, but a convenient pretext to gain access. And Moreau, a man in debt, was your tool, a tool you wielded with precision. The chalice was poisoned, broken to hide the evidence, and you, monsieur, set the stage. Garnier rose, his frame taut with defiance. You accuse without evidence, Poirot. Arrest me if you can, but you'll find nothing to hold me. I am a competitor, not a killer. He turned to Giraud, who had been listening intently. Inspecteur, are you swayed by this man's theatrics? Search my estate, my records. You'll find no poison, no proof. Giraud stepped forward, his scowl softening into a grim determination. We will, Garnier. My men are already at your vineyard, searching every bottle, every corner. And this vial Moreau speaks of, we'll trace it. He turned to Poirot, his tone grudging. You've stirred the pot, Poirot. If he's guilty, we'll prove it. Poirot's smile was serene. The truth, Inspecteur, is a vine that bears fruit in time. Monsieur Garnier, you play a clever game, but no game outwits Hercule Poirot. The payments, the crate, the vial, these are threads that tie you to the crime. And the chalice broken by your accomplice speaks louder than your denials. As Giraud signaled his sergeant to escort Garnier to a holding room, Hastings whispered, You've got him on the ropes, Poirot. Moreau's confession, the rag, the crate, it's all coming together. But do you think he meant to kill? Poirot's gaze was distant, his mind still tracing the puzzle's edges. Intent, Hastings, is the question. Garnier's ambition is clear, his payments to Moreau undeniable. But cyanide is no mere prank. It is a choice of death. Whether he meant murder or misadventure, he set the wheels in motion. He paused, his eyes brightening. Yet we must consider Mademoiselle Leroux. Her quarrel, her investment, does it connect? The truth is near, mon ami, but not yet complete. The library's fire crackled, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill of betrayal that hung in the air. Garnier's defiance, Moreau's confession, and the shattered chalice formed a pattern, but Poirot knew the final act awaited. With his unerring method, he would weave the threads into a tapestry of truth, revealing the competitor's deadly game. Chapter 11. The Final Confrontation. The grand hall of Chateau Lavigne was a cathedral of elegance, its vaulted ceiling adorned with gilded moldings and its walls hung with portraits of the Dubois lineage, their stern gazes bearing witness to the drama unfolding below. The late evening light streamed through stained glass windows, casting a mosaic of colors across the polished marble floor. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the hall, his small figure a beacon of calm authority amidst the tension that crackled like static. Before him, seated in a semicircle of high-backed chairs, were the key players in the tragedy of Etienne Dubois' murder. Madame Claire Dubois, her face pale but composed, Laurent Garnier, his sharp features taut with defiance, Sophie Leroux, her silk gown a stark contrast to her nervous demeanor, and Philippe Moreau, his sommelier's attire pristine despite his haggard expression. Captain Hastings stood to one side, his notebook clutched tightly, his eyes wide with anticipation. Inspector Giraud, flanked by two sergeants, loomed near the door, his mustache bristling with impatience. But his gaze fixed on Poirot, awaiting the denouement. The hall was silent save for the faint crackle of a fire in the massive hearth, its warmth doing little to dispel the chill of suspicion. Poirot had orchestrated this gathering, insisting that the truth must be revealed in the presence of all as the pieces of the puzzle, motive, opportunity, and the broken chalice, had finally aligned in his mind. Moreau's confession and Garnier's denials had brought the case to a precipice, and now Poirot, with his unerring method, would unveil the full tapestry of the crime. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice soft yet resonant, filling the hall with quiet command. We are gathered to lay bare the truth of Etienne Dubois' murder. A man of vision, of passion, was struck down in his moment of triumph, poisoned by cyanide in his family's heirloom chalice, which was then shattered to conceal the crime. The question is not only who, but why and how. Hercule Poirot has the answers. Madame Dubois' hands tightened in her lap, her gray eyes glistening with unshed tears. Garnier's jaw clenched, his fingers drumming a silent rhythm. Leroux's fan snapped open, her nervous fingers betraying her calm facade. Moreau stared at the floor, his shoulders slumped, already broken by his confession. Giraud shifted, his skepticism evident, but he remained silent, allowing Poirot his stage. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind him, his mustache twitching as his gray cells wove the final threads. "Let us begin with the chalice," he said, his tone deliberate. It was no ordinary vessel, but a symbol of the Dubois legacy etched with the family crest. Only Etienne Dubois drank from it, and only he died. The poison, cyanide, swift and deadly, was applied to the chalice, not the wine, for the decanter served all, yet none other suffered. The chalice was then broken, a deliberate act to scatter evidence, to suggest an accident. But why? To hide the poison's trace, to divert suspicion, he turned to Moreau, whose head remained bowed. Monsieur Moreau, you confessed to breaking the chalice, claiming it was to protect the chateau's reputation. A cracked vessel, you said, unfit for the tasting, but this was a lie. The chalice was flawless, polished by your own hands. You broke it to conceal the cyanide, applied with a rag we found in the cellar. Its chemical scent a silent accusation. Moreau's voice was a whisper, barely audible. I told you, Monsieur Poirot, I didn't know it was cyanide. I thought it was a harmless taint to ruin the wine. His eyes flicked to Garnier, a mixture of fear and accusation. Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Garnier. Monsieur Garnier, you are the architect of this tragedy. Your ambition burned to eclipse Chateau Lavigne, to see your vineyard rise above Dubois' shadow. You paid Monsieur Moreau, a man in debt, to sabotage the tasting. You supplied a vial claiming it would spoil the cuvée éclat, but it was cyanide, a poison you knew well from your vineyard's pest control. Your crate in the cellar, your payments to Moreau, these are no coincidences. You planned a murder disguised as a prank. Garnier leapt to his feet, his face flushed with fury. Lies, Poirot! I paid Moreau to disrupt, yes, a spilled glass, a tainted flavor. But murder? I am no killer. He acted alone, or with another. His voice echoed in the hall, but his eyes darted to the exits, betraying his panic. Poirot's smile was serene, his voice unrelenting. Non, monsieur, you chose cyanide, knowing its power. You knew Moreau's precision would place it only on Dubois' chalice. The breaking was your instruction to hide the residue. Your ambition was not to wound, but to destroy. He turned to Leroux, whose fan trembled in her hands. And you, Mademoiselle Leroux, you played no part in the act, but your secret illuminates the motive. Your investment in Chateau Lavigne, your quarrel with Dubois over its redirection, these fueled Garnier's resolve. Did you perhaps share your anger with him? Leroux's eyes widened, her voice sharp. I never spoke to Garnier of it. My quarrel was private, a business matter. I am no conspirator. Her denial was fervent, but Poirot's gaze softened, seeing the truth in her fear. I believe you, mademoiselle, he said gently. Your anger was a spark, but the fire was Garnier's. He used Moreau, a tool honed by desperation, to strike at Dubois. The chalice, the poison, the payments. These form the truth. He turned to Madame Dubois, his voice heavy with compassion. Madame, your husband was betrayed by ambition and greed, but his honor is restored by the truth. Claire Dubois rose, her face a mask of grief and gratitude. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. Etienne deserved justice. Her voice broke, but she stood tall, a pillar of dignity amidst the wreckage. Giraud stepped forward, his scowl replaced by grim resolve. Moreau, Garnier, you're both under arrest. My men will take you now. He nodded to his sergeants, who moved to cuff the men. Garnier's defiance crumbled, his shoulders sagging as he was led away. Moreau followed, his head bowed in defeat. Hastings closed his notebook, his face alight with admiration. By Jove, Poirot, you've done it. You pieced it all together, the chalice, the rag, the payments. Brilliant. Poirot's eyes gleamed, but his expression remained solemn. The truth, Hastings, is a light that pierces the darkest shadows. Garnier's ambition, Moreau's weakness, these were the instruments of death. But the chalice, broken yet eloquent, told the story. He turned to the hall's windows, where the vineyards lay under a twilight sky. Come, mon ami, our work here is done. The grand hall, with its portraits and its echoes, stood silent as the guilty were led away. The vanished chalice, though shattered, had spoken, and Hercule Poirot, with his grey cells and unyielding method, had ensured its voice was heard. Chapter 12. The Departure. The autumn sun hung low over the vineyards of Chateau Lavigne, its golden rays weaving through the rows of vines now tinged with the russet hues of late October. The chateau itself stood resolute, its stone facade glowing softly in the fading light, a silent witness to the tragedy and truth that had unfolded within its walls. Hercule Poirot stood on the gravel drive, his tailored suit impeccable, his hat tilted at a precise angle. His small hands adjusted his tie with characteristic care, though his dark eyes lingered on the distant hills where the vines seemed to whisper of secrets now laid bare. Beside him, Captain Hastings shifted his suitcase, his honest face alight with a mixture of relief and admiration as they prepared to board the car that would take them to the Bordeaux station. The arrest of Laurent Garnier and Philippe Moreau had brought a somber resolution to the murder of Etienne Dubois. The Grand Hall's confrontation, where Poirot had unraveled the web of ambition, betrayal, and poison, had left the chateau in a state of quiet mourning. Madame Claire Dubois, her dignity restored by the truth, had thanked Poirot with a grace that masked her grief. Inspector Giraud, though loath to admit it, had grudgingly acknowledged Poirot's brilliance, his final handshake firm but curt. The case of the vanished chalice, shattered to conceal a deadly act, was closed, yet its echoes lingered in Poirot's mind. "Hastings," Poirot said, his voice soft but resonant as they stood by the car. "What do you make of our time at Chateau Lavigne? A tragedy, oui, but also a triumph of the grey cells." Hastings grinned, his suitcase thumping onto the gravel. "By Jove, Poirot, you were magnificent. The way you pieced it together, the chalice, the rag, Garnier's payments, Moreau's confession. I thought Garnier would talk his way out, but you had him cornered. How did you know it was him pulling the strings?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile curving his lips. "Mon ami, it is always the same. The truth lies in the details, the small inconsistencies, the hidden motives. Garnier's ambition was a fire burning too brightly to be innocent. His payments to Moreau, the crate in the cellar, his knowledge of cyanide, these were threads that wove a noose, and Moreau, a man of precision, was the perfect tool, though his guilt was born of weakness, not malice." He paused, his gaze sweeping the vineyards. "The chalice broken to hide the poison was the key." It spoke when others would not. Hastings shook his head, marveling. "And Mademoiselle Leroux? I was sure her quarrel with Dubois meant something more. You cleared her, but her nerves had me fooled." Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. "Her secret was a distraction, Hastings. Her anger over the investment fueled Garnier's resolve, but she was no conspirator. The truth, mon ami, is like a fine wine. It requires time to reveal its depth. We saw her fear, but it was fear of scandal, not guilt." He straightened, his small frame radiating purpose. "Now we leave Chateau Lavigne to heal. Madame Dubois will carry on her husband's legacy, and we return to London." The driver, a silent figure in the chateau's livery, opened the car door and Poirot stepped inside with his usual grace. Hastings followed, settling into the seat with a sigh. "It's a shame, Poirot. Such a beautiful place, ruined by greed. Do you think Garnier meant to kill, or was it really just a prank gone wrong?" Poirot's gaze was distant, his mind still tracing the case's contours. "Intent is a shadow, Hastings. Garnier chose cyanide, a poison he knew well. Whether he meant death or merely ruin, he set the stage for murder. His ambition blinded him, and Moreau's desperation completed the act. The chalice, shattered, was their undoing, a symbol of pride turned to dust. He tapped his temple, a familiar gesture. The gray cells, they see what others overlook. Order, method, truth, these are my tools. As the car wound through the countryside, the vineyards fading into the twilight, Hastings leaned back, his voice thoughtful. You know, Poirot, I'll never look at a wine tasting the same way. All that elegance hiding such darkness. Makes you wonder what's in the next glass. Poirot's laugh was soft, a rare sound that warmed the car's interior. Mon ami, life is a tasting full of flavors, sweet and bitter, but with Hercule Poirot you need not fear the poison. His eyes twinkled as he gazed out at the passing landscape, already anticipating the next challenge, the next puzzle to unravel. The train to Bordeaux awaited, its whistle a distant call in the evening air. Chateau Lavigne receded behind them, its towers silhouetted against the sky, a monument to both beauty and betrayal. The vanished chalice, though broken, had revealed its truth, and Hercule Poirot, with his unerring method, had brought justice to its shattered remains. As the car sped toward the station, the detective's mind was already turning to the mysteries that lay ahead, his gray cells ever ready for the next game.